It was my pleasure to curate the exhibition that's currently on view in the gallery, Lucas Foglia's A Natural Order. We're here tonight to listen to Doug Elliott, who is a nationally recognized storyteller and a naturalist. He's also the person who introduced Lucas to some of the folks in the communities that he photographed. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Lucas and ask him to say a few words about Doug before he starts.
Hi, everybody. So I first met Doug when I was about 4 years old, when my mother, who's also a storyteller, invited Doug to perform at a storytelling festival in the town where I grew up. And Doug came to visit our family farm. As soon as he came to visit, I said, "You gotta come for a walk in the woods in the back." And I gave him a tour of the woods. And as we were going around, I told him everything that I thought and that I saw. And we passed these mushrooms. I said, "Those mushrooms you can't even touch because they're so poisonous they'll kill you." And Doug very quietly reached down and grabbed one and ate it right in front of me. And he's been teaching me ever since. When I first traveled to photograph and look for communities that were living self-sufficiently, I visited Doug because my mother said, "I think you should go visit Doug." And when I first went to visit him, he opened up a world to me that has become 5 years of photographing and learning and meeting people that are now friends. He wrote a book, as Joanne mentioned. He's wrote a number of books, five books and 9 recordings that are award-winning, and he tours nationally as a storyteller. His book, Wildwoods, inspired the community in which I photographed Acorn, which is the cover of my book. And in asking people I photographed who they learned from, so many people said Doug. And one of my last visits to Doug's house, I photographed him and his family collecting honey. And my friend Matt Forkin, who's also an alumni at Brown, was there with us. And Doug gave Matt a suit to protect him. He only had one extra suit, protective suit. He said, "Lucas, if you want to photograph, you can just walk into the bees. And if you're not scared, they won't bite you." Bite? Sting you. See? Exactly.
What are we going to do?
And I believed him, and I did it, and it worked. And I have all these photographs of him collecting this wonderful honey, and I'm covered in bees. So thank you for teaching me. Thank you for introducing me to a world of people that I've gotten to know. And thank you for coming here to share what you do with us.
All right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was I guess, it's similar times to now, when back in the 60s when I graduated from college, and so I'm sure you all, especially you college age, have heard enough about the 60s from your grandparents and grandparents. And there was this whole kind of movement of people who said, "This world is crazy. We got to go back to the land." And so we were part of the back to the land movement. All of a sudden, all these college-educated young people started moving back out into the sticks, back into the country, and just talking to the old timers and just seeing what we could learn, And it turns out, I've heard since that time, that there'd be, a bunch of old guys sitting around the stove around in one of the old little stores that said, "Yep, I saw old Zeke, he's out there plowing with his mule. Yep, had his hippie with him." I know what they're talking about. And so let's see. Well, I brought my band with me here today. I have a vegetarian member of my band. This is a bean from a tropical tree, and if you're from Puerto Rico, they call it the flamboyant tree because it has a beautiful flamboyant bloom. If you're from Miami, they call it the Royal Ponciana tree. If you're from the English-speaking Caribbean, they call it the shock bean, man, because it has loose beans inside the pod. So when you shake it, kind of. So I'll put that in my foot here, my shoe, maybe that'll give you a little percussion, And then a friend of mine was out in the desert, and he came on this where a cow had died, and there was this pile of bones. And I guess it was pretty well picked clean, the coyotes and the buzzards had come through, and he noticed there was an old piece of the hide was still there. So he took the hide and he soaked it in a creek, and then he got a hollow cottonwood log. And then he cleaned out the cottonwood log, and then went to the hardware store and bought turnbuckles screen door, and he cranked that hide down tight on top of that little hollow log and made a little hand drum. So that gives me a little percussion section that's easy to follow along, and so that'll kind of get us set up here. And so. All those rowdy crows, blackbirds, scaring little babies and making a big fuss. Yeah, a lot of people don't like crows and blackbirds either. You know, those crows, they're opportunistic omnivores. They're like a lot of us I've noticed around here. And one day you see those crows, they'll be out in some farmer's field, in the cornfield, and they'll be picking through the husk on those dry field corn. They'll be twisting the kernels right off of the cobs, and they'll be eating one after another. And the next day you see those crows, they'll be out in some meadow or a field, and they'll be digging up sodworms and chasing grasshoppers and other insect pests. The next day you see those crows, they'll be doing cleanup work along the highway. You know, they'll be working on a fresh roadkill. And around here we have two kinds of crows. There's the American crow, and the American crow has sort of a deep call. Then there's the fish crow along the coastal areas. Along the fish crows. The fish crows are very nasal. Oh, maybe I should learn to tweet like a canary. That'll be a little better for the children. And the fish crows have a more nasal. And the birders, what they tell you is that if you want to try to tell the difference, you have to do interspecies communication, and you ask them, say, "Are you an American crow?" And if it goes, you'll know that it's not. You know? and so a lot of people don't like crows, but a lot of us kind of admire crows. You ever seen crows in a windstorm? The rest of the birds will be hunkered down in the thickets, and those crows will be out there like a bunch of surfers, riding the waves. Every blustery gust, they meet with a dance and a twirl and a pirouette. Would it be that we could meet life's challenges with such grace and such agility? And you ever look at those dark black feathers? They are so dark and so black that when the light hits them right, they're actually iridescent and they reflect back every color of the rainbow. And those crows, they're smart, You almost never see a roadkill crow. You notice that? You almost never do. Because see what happens? Sometimes they'll be right alongside the road, picking up a roadkill, working on it. There'll be a whole flock of them there, but there's always one crow up in the tree, right? And when that crow sees a car coming, it goes, "Car, car, car!" You've heard him say that, haven't you? And they're so smart. They can recognize corn when it first comes up out of the ground. You ever seen corn when it first comes up? It looks like a little sprig of grass. Corn is in the grass family. Our whole civilization is supported by the grass family, all the grains. And those crows are so smart, they can recognize the little sprout when it first comes up out of the ground. They'll go out to that field, and they will pull that corn sprout up. The kernel will still be attached to it. They'll hold it down with one foot, twist that kernel off, and eat it. And go down the road, pull up the next one, pull up the next one. Sometimes a flock of crows can clean out a field in one morning, makes those farmers so mad. Oh, man. One time I went out to my corn patch, and sure enough, I saw a couple of crows fly up out of there. Small corn patch, didn't have a whole flock, but there was a couple of them fly out of there. I went out there, and I could see their tracks right in the dry dirt there. And crow tracks, they don't just hop around like little dicky birds. They're cool. They strut. They kind of walk around like this, and they drag their heel. You can see the little drag marks. I could see the drag marks, and sure enough, I could see where they pulled up the corn sprouts. And there they were. And the little sprout was laying beside the hole with the kernel twisted off of it. The next one laying there. These sucking little sprouts. I picked one of them up, and I chewed on it. And I learned something that morning. It was sweet. It was sweet as sugar. And I realized that, when a seed sprouts, that's when it reaches its most nutritious point. Right there, all the starches turn back to sugars, all the nutrients reach their highest point. And, you go to a Chinese restaurant, you get bean sprouts, go to the health food store, you buy alfalfa sprouts. And back in the hills and the hollers where I live, there's been a lot of corn been sprouted because those farmers are trying to get a value-added product to their corn crop. See, what they do, they sprout that corn, they increase the sugars in it, then they grind that up, and that becomes malt, right? Then they ferment that, and then they get it fermented, and then they distill it, and you can get a whole lot more for a jug of liquor than you could for a bushel of corn. And it's a mighty corn liquor. And people have been sprouting grains for centuries, but crows have known about it for even longer. And crows, they have a big vocabulary. They sing out danger. They sing out warning. They sing out the love between my brothers and my sisters. That's the noise that baby crows make when their mama's feeding them, when they're all in the nest with their brothers and sisters. And you know, if you speak crow, you can sing out your highest praises. You can sing out your worst fears and furies. If you can speak crow, you can tell anyone exactly what you think about them, and you feel a whole lot better. Now, I know there's a little bit of crow in each and every one of you, and we could probably turn this auditorium into a big flock of crows, maybe as big as Rhode Island's ever seen. So why don't you let out your crow? Come on! Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird flies. Blackbird flies into the light of the dark black night. Here lies the body of old John Crow. He once was high, but now he's low. Listen, Crow brothers now, one and all, for as you rise, so you must fall. Some people say that crows don't steal. What they doing in my cornfield? What if the blackbird says to the crow, what makes that farmer hate us so? Been the crazy place since we've been born. Then I trade to pull up corn. Once was a big black crow sitting high up in them trees. In his thick black beak he had a big old hunk of cheese. Along come a sleek red fox, as sly as he could be. He said, I'm going to give you some of that cheese. Now you just wait and see. Oh, crow, if your voice is half as beautiful as those fine, pretty feathers I see, it would please my ears to hear you sing a sweet, soft melody. Well, that crow never heard anyone say such a complimentary thing, so he opened his beak and began to quack and sing. Down fell that cheese to the mouth of the fox below. You stole my dinner, you dirty red thief! Oh, no, no, no! Not so, said the fox. It was a fair enough trade, vain crow, with your head up in the trees, don't you see? You got the compliments and I got the cheese. You got the compliments and I got the cheese. You got the compliments and Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird flies. Blackbird flies into the light of the dark black night. All right, Blackbird. I guess some of you probably recognize that Beatles song, Paul McCartney's Blackbird singing in the dead of night. And that little verse about here lies the body of old John Crow was written by the spirit of the American Revolution, Thomas Paine. It was written when he was a 9-year-old boy as a poem. And then that little bit about upset the blackbird says to the crow, what makes that farmer hate us so, came from the Frank C. Brown collection of North Carolina folklore. Frank Brown traveled all through the countryside of North Carolina in the early 1900s and collected 7 volumes of folklore. I went through there looking for these little floating lyrics that just fit into different kinds of songs. And then you maybe recognize that Aesop's Fable. I had a lot of help with the arrangement of that Aesop's Fable from Lucas's mom, Heather Forrest. And so it's sort of fun to bring it home. So, you know, people have been asking about those bark baskets and about my backpack. And when I first saw one, you can tell what this backpack's made of. Can you tell what it's made of? Bark, right? And it's made out of bark from a tulip poplar tree. Tulip tree, they call it up here. And when I first saw one of these, an old mountain man, one of those fellows I followed around in the woods, see if I could learn what I could from. Old mountain man had a few of these hanging up on his porch. And when I saw them, they were smaller like this. I said, Paul, these things are beautiful. What's the story on these things? He says, why, buddy, these are berry baskets. I said, berry baskets? He says, yeah, we make them out of tulip poplar bark. We lace them up with hickory bark. And when we make them, we put a loop on either side. That way you can put a string around them. And then that way you can pick berries with both hands that way. And I said, that's pretty good. He said, yeah, the way they come about. He said, say you're out fishing. Of course, when he's talking about fishing on one of these little mountain creeks. Going up the creek, dropping a little worm in these little mountain streams, trying to catch a few of the little speckled trout. He said, well, say you're working your way on up this creek and eventually you get up on the mountain and you run out of creek, so you go up over the ridge, go down to the next creek. What about you get out there on the ridge and you see the awfulest sight of huckleberries or blackberries that you ever saw? Well, buddy, you'd love to take home some of those berries, but what if you haven't got anything to carry them in? What are you going to do? He said with a twinkle in his eye. You ever tried to carry home a pocket full of fresh blackberries? You know, you only do it about once. And he said, well, if you know how to make your bark basket, see what you do, you find your little tulip poplar tree. And what you do is you cut around it, and then you cut down one side of it, and if it's during the growing season, you can peel that bark right off of the tree. He says, and then what you do is you score sort of like a football shape on the bottom of it. And you score it just halfway through the bark so it'll fold on that football or eye shape. He says, and you fold it up. And there you got you a basket. You can carry them berries home. I was so impressed with the resourcefulness of a traditional country person. Need a basket? Sit down and make you one. It'll only take you 15, 20 minutes if you knew what you were doing. I was so impressed with that. And I got to kind of wondering, who invented these things? And of course, Native Americans have been making these baskets for centuries. And it's interesting when you look at the cultural artifacts from various tribes, you find that the form of the basket is the same, but of course the materials are different depending on the bioregion. You go out in the Northwest, they make the same baskets, the same form of basket, but they use cedar bark. You go up here in the Northeast, might be more like ash and elm bark. And you go in the high desert, might be juniper bark. Turns out these baskets are also made in Europe, also made in Asia, also made in Africa, South America, basically anywhere there's trees that have a bark that is split, people have made this form. And I love to do this demonstration for school kids and sort of point it out to them, and kind of reminds us all that in some ways we're all one big human family, because if you went back far enough in all of our families where they're all doing the same thing anyhow. And this one little boy who raised up his hand and said, Miss Jelly, I see baskets just like that all the time. I said, you do? You know, are your parents basket makers? He said, no, but I see baskets just like that all the time. I said, where do you see baskets like that? He says, McDonald's. The McDonald's, he said, yeah, man, the large French fries. And I don't go to McDonald's very much, but I went to McDonald's after school that day. And I bought me a pack of French fries. And there it is. Old as our oldest ancestors. It's modern industrial design. The most efficient way to make a pencil out of a piece of flat material is this ancient yet modern form. You know, there it is. You know, I learned something in school that day. I look at the bottom of the box. See what it says? It says, the design of this box is a registered trademark of McDonald's Corporation. Don't you think they're a couple 100,000 years too late on that? I hope I don't get sued for making these things, but you know, it is a crazy world out there. You know? Now, often a question I'll get after I do this demonstration is, well, doesn't it kill the tree? And for years, you know, I would just kind of go through this big rationalization. Well, yeah, you know, but I usually find 2 or 3 trees that are growing crowded, and I cut one down. Then I make a whole run of baskets out of that tree, start at the bottom and keep making baskets all the way up. And I take it and I saw it up and I use it for firewood. And it's all true. But then it suddenly dawned on me, something that so many of us environmentalists aren't even aware of, and most loggers know all about it. You know, when you cut down a hardwood tree, do you kill it? No. Almost never, because it puts up shoots. I realize I've been cutting down the same tree in my own backyard and shading the grapevine for 20 years. And so if it's a hardwood tree, now they do replant like conifers, but hardwood trees put up new shoots and they'll keep growing for many years. And so all right, well let's see. Speaking of those kind of things, today let's see. Let me give you a riddle. This riddle, it's old Appalachian riddle. It goes like this. White is snow, but snow it ain't. Green is grass, but grass it ain't. Red is blood, but blood it ain't. Black is coal, but coal it ain't. What is it? White is snow, green is grass, red is blood, black is coal. Anybody got an idea? How about a blackberry? Now what's white about a blackberry?
Flower.
The flower, right? White flower, green leaves, little green berry when it first forms is green, then it turns red right before it gets ripe. When it's ripe, it's black, it's coal. And you know, there's also another sort of an Appalachian mind twister that kind of talks about that too. It goes, a blackberry is red when it's green. Red when it's green, because when it's red, it's not ripe. When it's not ripe, it's red. I mean, when it's green, it's not, so it's not ripe. When it's red, you know, it's a little mind twister, but it kind of comes around. I love that, you know, but it kind of ended so abruptly. I kind of called my friend Carolyn Jones. I said, she's a berry farmer and also a master of doggerel and rhymes and riddles. And I said, can you do anything with this? A blackberry is red when it's green. She called me back about 20 minutes later and says, a blackberry is red when it's green, a blueberry is ripe when it's blue, but how can we know when we look down below if a dewberry don't or it do? Dewberry's that little low-growing blackberry, you know? And you know, there's a concept that a lot of country people know about called the Blackberry winter. Y'all ever heard of the Blackberry winter? The Blackberry winter is that last cold spell that comes through when the blackberries are in bloom. And so it's the kind of thing that, say you're a gardener and it's been like one of these winters where it's been warm the whole winter and you had a month of warm weather and then you notice the blackberries are blooming. You think, my tomato plants are this big, I want to get them out in the garden. I don't know how long I can keep them in the house any longer. Oh, it's been warm for 3 weeks, so I'm going to put them out there. And you hear there's a weather report. The weather report says, cool front blowing in out of the northwest and maybe a little cooler the next couple of days. And you see the blackberries in bloom. You just might wait, because sometimes that last cold front that comes through when the blackberries are in bloom can bring a frost. And you know, the great anthropologist Margaret Mead titled her autobiography "Blackberry Winter." And in the beginning of the book, there's like a little invocation that says, it's often said that blackberries won't be sweet unless frost has touched their bloom. And you know, I think she's talking about the frost that touches our bloom as we get older and we hope makes us sweeter, you know. But you know, you talk to the country folks and they'll say, well, that's true. You know, when there's been a blackberry winter, a lot of times the blackberries will be sweeter. You see, what happens is something that a lot of farmers and orchardists know about, is thinning. And what happens is the frost comes through. It won't kill all the blackberries. So they come in a big cluster. There's a big bunch of blooms. It'll kill off the ones that are in the most vulnerable stage, and the other ones will stay. And so that means there'll be less berries, so it'll have more energy going into the fewer berries, so it'll make them bigger and sweeter. And so it's just kind of interesting how that all comes around, you know. And there's a song that celebrates blackberries, and it goes something like this. It's called a Blackberry Boogie. I came here and wrote out in the boogie a little bit. Maybe you'll like to boogie along with me. It has a great call and response chorus. It goes like this. Blackberry boogie, and you repeat. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, and all together we go. Blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Long about sun up every day, I grab my basket and I'm on my way. I run down the road just laughing and kicking, heading for the patch to do some blackberry picking. I fill my basket up to the top, makes my lips go flippity-flop, flippity-flop. Well, hear a little voice and it sounds so sad. It says, don't pick me now, cause I ain't right, Dad. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. See my gal I set my basket down. She says, "Hey there, baby, are you going to town?" I said, honey, I'm going to scratch. I'll meet you in a minute in the blackberry patch. She grabbed her basket, she jumped and squealed. I'm heading for the bushes and she's hot on my heels. Well, I picked on one and she picked on the other. We met in the middle and she yells, "Oh, brother, Blackberry Boogie, Blackberry Boogie, Blackberry Boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch." We're going through the bushes, walking hand in hand, picking blackberries just to beat the band. I grabbed her for a kiss. She said, "Turn me loose. Your lips are all blue from that blackberry juice." I said, "Come on, honey, now, don't be coy. Don't you know I'm your blackberry picking boy?" Well, I kissed her once. She let out a sigh. She said, "Let's go to my house and bake a pie." Blackberry Boogie, Blackberry Boogie, Blackberry Boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Blackberry Boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Blackberry Boogie, I'll meet you. All right, all right. That song was recorded by Tennessee Ernie Ford probably 50 years ago. I think it's fun to be boogied to the same tune my grandparents might have been boogieing to too. You know, there's another story kind of along that kind of line, an old Native American story about a man, and it's sort of like, in some ways, it seems like a pan-Native American story. I've heard it told by natives from various different cultures. And it all tells about this man and this woman. They've been together for a long time, and they were having trouble getting along. And you know, I heard Lloyd Arneage, a great Cherokee storyteller, and he says he thinks the story started among his people, the Cherokee. And he says these two, this was first man and first woman. But all we know is these two had been together for a long time, and they were having trouble getting along. And one day, I mean, she didn't feel like he respected her, and he did respect her, and he did love her, but somehow it wasn't coming through. She got mad. She stomped out of that lodge one day, and she just took off. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was she was getting out of there. He didn't know what to do. She never just stomped out and left before. He kind of moped around the lodge for about half the day. He thought she'd cool off, and then she'd come back, and they could kind of work it out, but she wouldn't come back. He realized he better go out there and find her. So he started down the trail he was a good tracker. Now he could follow her tracks. He could see from her tracks. He could tell a lot from those tracks. He could tell from the way that heel had hit into the ground. She was stomping mad. And he could tell from how far apart those tracks were. She was moving pretty fast. And he followed those tracks, and he followed them down the trail, and they kept going and kept going, and then he'd lose the tracks, and he'd keep following, and he'd find the tracks again. Every time he came on a set of the tracks, he realized they were relatively the same age. He realized he was unable to close the distance between them. He sat down there in the trail and he prayed. He had a conversation with the powers, and he said, "You don't have to make her change her mind, but could you just slow her down a little so I could talk to her?" Yeah, it seemed like maybe his prayers were being heard, because as she was walking down the trail, the breezes started rustling in the leaves in the trees. And they were just rustling, and they were kind of singing out to her, kind of singing out, calling her name. And then soon the birds began singing. She was not hearing any breezes in the trees. The birds began singing, but not like they normally sang. They were singing harmonies. They were singing melodies. They were calling out her name. She was not listening to any birds. She was just stomping out of there. She had a pain in her heart. She had a lump in her throat. She was so ticked off. She was just stomping down there. And she was going to take special intervention. Soon flowers began to just burst into bloom as she passed, and she was not looking at the flowers. She was looking at that trail leading out of there. That's all she was looking at. She was just heading down that trail, just stomping mad. Oh, she was so upset. And then something caught her eye. Right there beside the trail, something bright red. She stopped. It was a berry, but it wasn't like any berry she'd ever seen before. It was bright red. She stopped, picked that berry. She smelled it. It smelled so good. Oh, it smelled so good. She tasted it. Oh, it was sweet, had a tang to it, wonderful flavor. She ate that berry. It was delicious. She looked around. She hadn't stopped all day. She was hungry. She was thirsty. There was a few more berries. She stopped, picked a few more, started eating those berries, and soon Soon she couldn't find any more berries. And then she saw this little open meadow area, and it was full of these little berries down in among all the other plants. She started picking those berries, eating those berries. Oh, it was so good. That juice trickled down the throat, started to kind of soften that hard spot in her heart, and that lump in the throat kind of eased out a little bit. She looked around, the flowers were blooming like she'd never seen. The birds were singing beautifully, and the breezes in the trees were so soothing. And then she looked up and she saw her husband. As soon as she saw him and saw the expression on his face, she said, "You ought to try these berries, they're really good." They say it was a long time before they got up out of that field. And when they did, they were walking home hand in hand. And all along that trail where they'd never seen them before were those little red berries. They're all along the trail. And if you talk to, and they're the first berries, they're still out there. They're the first berries that come on after the hard freezes of winter are over. And if you talk to Native Americans, you ask them about that berry, what do they call it? It's usually a word that translates out to mean heartberry, because it's shaped like the human heart. And it turns out we can grow them in our garden. And when we do, we mulch them with straw, and we call them strawberries. And that's how the first strawberry came to be. That story is old as the people, as modern as the day. There's a song that celebrates strawberries. Kind of goes like this. Strawberry picking, strawberry picking. When you think you see some, that's when there are none. When you think there are none, that's when you see some. I was walking one day with no real reason. I had forgotten it was strawberry season through the honeysuckle clover and the butterflies. All of a sudden, there they were before my very eyes. Strawberry picking, strawberry picking. When you think you see some, that's when there are none. When you think there are none, that's when you see some. Well, you stoop one way and you stoop the other. Don't step back on your little bitty brother. Watch your big boots in the strawberry bed. Don't pick the little ones that aren't quite red. Strawberry picking, strawberry picking. When you think you see some, that's when there are none. When you think there are none, that's when you see some. Well, while strawberry is wonderful to eat, the sun shines down and makes it sweet. I can tell you've been sneaking to the strawberry bed, 'cause your mouth and your fingers and your ears are red. Strawberry picking, strawberry picking. When you think you see some, that's when there are none. When you think there are none, that's when you see some. Strawberries, strawberries. That song's about the range of Sweden. There's an old Taoist tale. You ever hear about the fellow that's being chased by the tiger? He was being chased by this tiger. He was running for all he was worth. There was no place he could run and hide. He looked, and that tiger was gaining on him. There wasn't a tree, climbing, there was nothing. There was a cliff for the tiger. He chose the cliff. And he jumped off of that cliff, and he caught this vine on the way down. Thank goodness he was so lucky. How's that vine? And he's hanging on that vine, looked up, saw that tiger looking over. Thought, oh, man. All I have to do is just lower myself down to the bottom and I'll be home free. He looked down, there was another tiger. He thought, what am I going to do? He sat there holding it on, this vine, just hanging there, just trying to think of what to do next. And up there, just up out of his reach, there was a little rock ledge, and the vine was stretched tight over that rock ledge. And he was hanging on there, and he saw some movement up there, and he looked, and there was a little mouse. The little mouse was as light as the day. The little mouse came out and started chewing on that vine. Just chewing on that vine. Oh, no, the mouse went in. And he looked, another mouse came out, a little dark mouse, dark as the night, came out there, nibbled on that vine. He thought, oh no, he looked, that little dark mouse came in, the little white mouse came back out again, chewed, the light colored mouse went in, and that came the dark mouse, and they just kept taking turns, and that vine kept getting thinner and thinner, and he's thinking, what am I going to do, what am I going to do? He looked, and it was a strawberry growing right out of the cliff, right out within his arm's reach. The strawberry was perfectly ripe. He reached and grabbed that strawberry. He ate that strawberry. He enjoyed that strawberry. He gave thanks. And according to the Taoist, that's the end of that story. That story is really about our life. We cling to this little thread of life that just keeps us here. And every day and every night come by, And that little thread gets thinner and thinner and thinner. In the meantime, what we need to be doing is enjoying our strawberries and giving thanks. Isn't that what we're trying to do now? We're just hanging by a thread. We're just hanging by a thread. The answer to our problems are right there inside of our head. We're just hanging by a thread. You don't have to be smart. The answer to our problems are right there inside of our heart. We're just hanging by a thread. Everything we do, we're just trying to get ahead, trying to push it through. Sometimes we catch up, and it sure feels nice. But any kingdom can be rocked with a roll of the dice. We're all just hanging by a thread. We're just hanging by a thread. The answer to our problems is right there inside of our head. Well, everything's a gamble. Every man must fall. Everything is all we got. We ain't got nothing at all. In the moment of a vision, what do we see? A fine silver thread between you and me. We're all just hanging by a thread. We're just hanging by a thread. The answer to our problems are right there inside of our head. We're just hanging by a thread. You don't have to be smart. The answer to our problems are right there inside of our heart. Inside our heart. All right. You know, we found out that dandelions are one of the most nutritious plants that you can grow. Top of the charts for vitamin A, top of the charts, they're really high, one of the highest natural sources of potassium, all kinds of other trace minerals and all that. I notice around here, you all got dandelions just everywhere. It seems like the farther north you go, the more the dandelions just come up everywhere. Where we live at about 1,200 feet in the southern Appalachians, and we get a few dandelions, but not a lot of them in the yard. And I don't know if you've been around these gardeners, but I happen to live with one. And every January and February, those garden catalogs come in, and she gets this far away look in her eye. And she's looking at all these, mostly looking for seeds she hasn't already saved. She's going through the greens one time. She's going through, look at this, all these lettuces. Look at this oak leaf lettuce, this romaine lettuce. Look at this. Oh, hey, look at this, she says. There's Italian dandelions and French dandelions. Wow. You know, here's two cultures that are known for their cuisine, known for their excellent cooking, and they've been selecting out dandelions over the centuries. Let's get them, order them. She ordered those seeds, you know, she got them set up in a little greenhouse, she got them all set up in there, the little seed flats, and it took a long time, but they finally started coming up. Soon she had little baby dandelions, you know, just hard an inch big. And she took them out there, we put the compost in the beds, we started setting those dandelions out. And sure enough, they started to grow. You know, soon the grass started coming in between the dandelions. We had to weed out the grass, you know. Have dandelions in your yard. You have a gift from God, you know, the most nutritious plant. Sometimes people, you taste the dandelion and think, well, they're good for you. They're just kind of a little bit bitter. What's the deal with that? Well, what I found you can do, either you can cook them, saute them, or you can chop them really finely. That oxidizes them a little bit, and make a sweet sour dressing. That sweet sour cuts the bitter, and it's amazing. You can take a salad that's like 90% dandelion greens, serve it to people who are like wild food resistant, you know, and they'll say, oh, that's good salad, let them eat for a while, you know, tell them what you're eating for a while. Then eventually you might end up, when you tell them, you might end up having help getting your dandelions the next time. Another trick is getting them really early in the spring, almost before the bloom is actually past. And you know, eventually our dandelions, they started growing pretty good, and actually, I took one of the leaves was so big and impressive, I actually took it and pressed it, took it to the coffee center. And that's pretty impressive. Nice dandelion leaf, huh? You know, I was so proud of this. It's so big it was. And you know, you see the jagged teeth on the leaves? You know, the French looked at those jagged teeth and they said, it looks like the jaws of a lion. So they called it Dandelion. That's tooth of a lion in French, right? Now as Americans, we never could speak that French very good. You know, we just do that, you know. We just say dandelion. And that's where we got the name dandelion, you know. Now, you know, you may know some native French speaker. You may ask him, look, we heard this wacko at the university. He said that you call that dandelion. Is that true? And they say, well, that's the old name for the plant. What we call it now is pissenlit. Pissenlit translates out to mean piss in the bed. And what that refers to is the diuretic quality of the dried leaves. Now, if you wanted a gentle diuretic, you take a bunch of dandelion leaves, make a tea out of it, and drink the tea. Now, what's interesting, if you go to a physician and they prescribe a diuretic medication for you, well, with that diuretic medication comes a potassium supplement, because if you're going to lose a bunch of fluid, you have to keep your electrolyte balance. Now, isn't it amazing? Here's the plant with the folk name pea in the bed, and it's also one of the highest natural sources of potassium. So there you go, you know. And you know, I was so proud of my dandelion leaves. I found out there's a group called the Defenders of Dandelion up in Ohio, and they have this big dandelion cook-off, and they have T-shirts that say, "Eat them, don't eat them, don't eat them." And I thought, whoa, can anybody whoop my dandelion leaf? And so I sponsored a dandelion leaf contest. Can anyone beat my dandelion leaf? Well, they didn't hardly get any contestants. Nobody could beat my dandelion leaf, you know. I started bragging about it. I'd take people on herb walks and different kinds of programs, things like that. Speaking of which, tomorrow at the Audubon Center at 10 o'clock, we're going to be going out and looking at a weeds and woods lore walk. We're going to be looking at useful plants and critters and doing lots of woods lore, and it has a sliding scale between $0 and $20, and you can come if you want tomorrow. But anyhow, so I was on a walk like that, and I was talking to people, and I said, "No one beat my dandelion leaf. That's all right, beat dandelion leaf." I was so proud of it. And this woman with a strong European accent says, "You know, I think I have seen them bigger than that." Yeah. Well, look, later that summer, this little package came up from Eva Bergman over in Denmark, and she was thinking of me. And she sent me these dandelion leaves. She pressed them and sent them to me. And I wrote her back. I said, "Were these grown with some kind of artificial fertilizer?" She said, "No." She was vacationing in Sweden, and they were in a nature preserve. And I guess you know, with those long summer days that they have up as farther north you get, those leaves just never stop growing. So I guess she whooped our American dandelion buds, didn't she? So dandelions, you know, not only are they useful for just greens, but you take the flowers and make dandelion wine. You can take the roots and you can make a liver tonic from the roots. You can actually roast the roots and make coffee out of them. You can saute the greens. You can salad them. You can take the seed heads, blow them, and make wishes. And there's a song that sort of celebrates dandelions that goes like this. Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere. But they don't care. Dandelions, they never take a vacation. They always popping up without invitation. Dandelion, there's always enough to share. I went to the store where the gardeners go to buy me some dandelion seeds. The man behind the counter said, "Son, don't you know you don't have to plant them, they grow like a weed." Wow! Dandelions, they don't have to be planted. Why does everyone take them for granted? Dandelion, they're as special as you and me. Well, you wake up in the morning, you're feeling kind of low. Your get up and go is gone. You need some vitamins, some remedies, some tonic, or some tea. Well, look out in your lawn. You got dandelions by the bunch of the bowlful. Eat them all up, they'll make you feel soulful. Dandelions, they're as special as you and me. Dandelions, blow those seeds and make wishes for money, world peace, or lots of sweet kisses. Dandelions, they make your wishes come true. I think I want to carry on here for just about enough time, you know. I've learned so much from talking to the old timers, you know, and I ought to do one little piece here at the end. I was following this old mountain man around and just trying to ask him these plants. I was just learning all the plants in those days, and you know, we were walking on the edge of the woods there, and I see all these little berries all over the ground. And I couldn't see what any of them hanging on the bushes. I couldn't see them. They were kind of brown and slippery looking. I said, I don't know. I can't even tell what kind of berries these are. He said, well, son, don't you know what those are? He says, those are mountain snark berries. I said, mountain snark berries? Why do they call them that? They make you smarter? He says, yeah, you ought to try one of them. I tasted one. I said, oh, this tastes like deer poop. He said, see, you're getting smarter already. So you're walking through the woods and your nose goes, ooh, there must be some critter's scat near you. It may seem gross, but it's okay. They ain't got no place to flush it away, flush it away, flush it away. Starts with S and ends with T. Comes out of you and comes out of me. I know what you think, you can call it that, but let's be scientific and call it scat. Scooby bop bop and bop. You know, scat, that's jazz horn. Scooby bop 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 bop. You all sing scat. Scooby bop bop bop. And down the trail, something's lying on the ground. Makes Tootsie Roll all long and brown. Don't wrinkle your nose, don't lose your lunch. Break it apart, you might learn a bunch. Don't use your fingers, now use a stick. Keep sanitary, now that's the trick. If you want to find out what animals eat, take a long hard look at what they excrete. Stuck in the scats, all kinds of clues. Parts of the food that their bodies can't use, like repeat after me, like bones of fur, berries and seeds, berries and seeds, crawfish shells, grass fibers and weeds, grass fibers and weeds. You know the chorus by now. Starts with an S and ends with a T. It comes out of you and it comes out of me. I know what you think, you can call it that, but let's be scientific and call it scat. Got in your car by the woods or a field, scat goes flat on your windshield. It's full of seeds, all purple and white. You just got bombed by a bird in flight, bird in flight, bird in flight. Starts with S and ends with a T. Comes out of you and it comes out of me. I know what you think, you can call it that, but let's be scientific and call it scat. Possum up in the cemetery, eating all Simmons he can see. Backed his butt into the weeds, his scat was nothing but Simmons seed. Scat was nothing but Simmons seed. Start with S and ends with T. It comes out of you and it comes out of me. I know what you think, you call it that. Let's scientific and call it scat. I told you that last one, you guess this next one. Down by the creek on a hollow log, scat full of berries and the bones of a frog. Late last night he was out with the moon. Way in the creek it was Mr. Raccoon. Start with an S and then with a T. It comes out of you and it comes out of me. I know what you're thinking, you can call it that. Let's be scientific and call it scat. A piece part's hot, a piece part's cold. Scat on the trail, 2 minutes old. 2 minutes old? Is this a joke? No, it's still warm. You can see it smoke. See it smoke. A cat scat, rat scat, bat scat too. All God's creatures got a scat a lot too. A piece part's hot, a piece part's cold. Scat on the trail, 9 days old. 9 days old, how can you tell? It's getting kind of dry and not much smell. Not much smell. A dog do, hog do, frog do too. All God's creatures got a doodly do. A piece part's hot, a piece part's cold. Scat in a cave 1,000,000 years old. 1,000,000 years old, could that be right? It's no jive petrified coprolite. A coprolite, coprolite. Pterodactyl cat, rex cat too. Them dinosaurs, so cat lot too. Start with an S and ends with a T. Comes out of you and it comes out of me. Know what you think, you can call it that. Let's be scientific and call it scat. Thinking through the woods, be quiet now. Let's put down and something goes squish. Don't put it in your mouth, it ain't delicious. Let's put some in a petri dish. Look through a microscope, and what do you see? Microscopic organisms, 1, 2, 3, Bacillus, Streptococcus, and E. coli. They eat scat and they die. Don't you worry, don't need to cry. They ain't that different from you and I. They ain't that different from you and I. Start with S and ends with T. Comes out of you and comes out of me. Know what you think, you can call it that. Let's scientific and call it stats. So you want to find out who was out and around, take a long hard look at the scat on the ground, tell us what they eat, tell us who they are. That's what we know about the scat so far. The scat rat. Thank you. It's time to enjoy the show, and I sure appreciate it being able to talk to you all today. Appreciate it being a part of this whole great assembly, and what a great thing. Thank you. If anybody wants to sign up on my mailing list, you'll get various little interesting blogs about the natural world now and then. And thank you. Go visit the show. There's still lots more